In the realm of Azure architecture and services, understanding the distinction between public and private endpoints is crucial. Endpoints are essentially network interfaces that allow communication between different components of a cloud environment. They play a pivotal role in ensuring secure and efficient data flow. This presentation will delve into the definitions, use cases, and best practices for both public and private endpoints within Azure, providing a comprehensive understanding necessary for the AZ900 certification. Public endpoints are network interfaces that are accessible over the internet. They allow external users and services to interact with Azure resources. For instance, a public endpoint might be used for a web application that needs to be accessible to users worldwide. These endpoints are assigned public IP addresses, making them reachable from any location. However, this accessibility comes with security considerations, as public endpoints are exposed to potential threats from the internet. Public endpoints are ideal for scenarios where resources need to be accessible to a broad audience. Examples include web applications, APIs, and services that require global reach. For instance, an e-commerce website hosted on Azure would use a public endpoint to allow customers to browse and make purchases. Similarly, a public API might be used by developers worldwide to integrate with a service. The key advantage is the ease of access, but it necessitates robust security measures to protect against unauthorized access. Given their exposure to the internet, public endpoints require stringent security measures. This includes implementing firewalls, using secure protocols like HTTPS, and employing Azure's security features such as network security groups, NSGs, and Azure DDoS protection. Additionally, monitoring and logging access to public endpoints can help detect and mitigate potential threats. Ensuring that only necessary ports are open and using strong authentication mechanisms are also critical practices. Private endpoints, in contrast, are network interfaces that are not accessible over the internet. They allow Azure resources to communicate within a virtual network, VNet, securely. Private endpoints are assigned private IP addresses, making them accessible only within the VNet or through a VPN express route connection. This isolation enhances security by limiting exposure to the internet and reducing the attack surface. Private endpoints are suitable for scenarios where resources need to be accessed securely within a controlled environment. Examples include internal applications, databases, and services that should not be exposed to the internet. For instance, a company's internal HR application might use a private endpoint to ensure that only employees within the corporate network can access it. Similarly, a private endpoint can be used for secure communication between different Azure services within the same VNet. The primary security benefit of private endpoints is their isolation from the internet. This significantly reduces the risk of external attacks. Additionally, private endpoints can leverage Azure's built-in security features, such as NSGs and Azure Private Link, to further enhance security. By restricting access to a VNet, private endpoints ensure that only authorized users and services within the network can communicate with the resource, providing an additional layer of protection. To implement a public endpoint in Azure, you typically start by creating a resource, such as a virtual machine or a web app, and then assign it a public IP address. Azure provides various tools and services to manage and secure public endpoints, including Azure Firewall, NSGs, and Azure DDoS protection. It's essential to configure these security measures appropriately to protect the resource from unauthorized access and potential threats. Implementing a private endpoint involves creating a resource within a VNet and assigning it a private IP address. Azure Private Link can be used to create private endpoints for Azure services, allowing secure access from within the VNet. This setup ensures that the resource is isolated from the internet and accessible only through the VNet or a secure connection like VPN or ExpressRoute. Proper configuration of NSGs and other security features is crucial to maintaining a secure environment. Effective endpoint management involves several best practices. For public endpoints, ensure robust security measures, such as firewalls, secure protocols, and monitoring. For private endpoints, focus on network isolation and access control. Regularly review and update security configurations and use Azure's built-in tools for monitoring and threat detection. Additionally, consider using Azure Policy to enforce compliance and security standards across your endpoints. One common pitfall is misconfiguring security settings, which can expose resources to unauthorized access. To avoid this, always follow Azure's security best practices and regularly audit your configurations. Another pitfall is not monitoring endpoint activity, which can lead to undetected threats. Implement comprehensive monitoring and logging to keep track of access and potential security incidents. Lastly, ensure that you are using the appropriate type of endpoint for your use case to balance accessibility and security. Consider a company that runs both a public-facing e-commerce site and an internal HR application. The e-commerce site uses a public endpoint to allow customers worldwide to access the site, while the HR application uses a private endpoint to ensure that only employees within the corporate network can access it. By using the appropriate type of endpoint for each application, the company can balance accessibility and security effectively. This case study highlights the importance of understanding and correctly implementing public and private endpoints. Understanding the distinction between public and private endpoints is essential for managing Azure resources effectively. Public endpoints provide global accessibility but require robust security measures to protect against threats. Private endpoints offer enhanced security through network isolation, making them ideal for internal applications and services. By following best practices and leveraging Azure's security features, you can ensure that your endpoints are both secure and efficient. This knowledge is crucial for the AZ900 certification and for managing Azure environments effectively.